how did humans make this, right? This is a microprocessor. That's a human hair, the width of a human hair. Look how deep this goes. How, as human beings, have we been even able to come close to making something like this? You think, oh, that's amazing, like he's gone in quite far there. It just keeps going and going. Look how far this goes. How did we make this? Like what process did it blows my mind. It just keeps on going. Look at that. And then the zoom out. And like that was all just right in there. And that's the human hair.
Oh my goodness. Well, guys, it's David Vos again. I hope you guys are having a beautiful day. I'm having the best day. It's a sunny, beautiful day. And the cats have finally settled down and they're not terrorized and everything. For a moment, I think I can do a little video. Guys, I was going to do a video, kind of a part 2 of that video I did yesterday. But I saw this clip and I needed to show you this. I looked up on AI to make sure this is real. And that video that you see only goes, I counted 7 layers down, zooming in, 7 layers. But AI tells me that they can go down many more layers, at least 15, with little, very small micro or nano components. And to start with, it's hard to believe that this is real. You know, they show us pictures of space and it's CGI. It isn't real. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is not real, because I don't even know why it would have to be like that other than as a wonder. You know how the Bible says they'll be giving us signs and wonders in the latter days to try and convince us that they are God, right? And they're calling it God, that they're building a digital God. They're the creator, so they're the creators of God. And even though I do believe, I mean, I see airplanes in the sky. I see jet airplanes, but that's not a big thing because we know how a car works and how an engine works, combustion engines, and it turns a crank and it makes the wheels go, and you know, all that is understandable. It's not a miracle. It's not some kind of, they're not creating God. But even when you go back in history, when they made the first locomotion, right, and the train came through, and people thought, I guess the Native Americans thought it was some kind of a beast. I remember the stories my dad used to tell about the Indian, that the last Indian they found in Butte County, California. His name was Ishi, he finally said, which is, I guess, a Hebrew name that means man. When they found him, he would sit up on the butte and watch these locomotives come through. He thought they were animals, beasts, monsters. So, you know, yeah, we can be fooled. There is sleight of hand because today we understand what a train engine is, or what a car is, or even an aeroplane. Now, this thing with the phones going through the air, radio waves, and creating screens and holograms, that very certainly does seem magical. And then when you got AI, and it's hard to wonder how they could do AI, although I've said they could have millions of people sitting around in cubicles typing out answers, or they could have a method where they've typed out all the conceivable answers and put them in some kind of an algorithmic cataloging computer. It might be simpler than what we think, but when you take a look at something like this, and if it's real, You have to scratch your head and wonder how in the world then, what size tweezers do they use to go in there and put together this structure? It doesn't seem logical. I've said that to give you an idea how they are manipulating us, they claim they can cut DNA, splice it is the word, and they splice other pieces into the DNA, and they claim they can alter your DNA. I don't believe that. First of all, I've pointed out before that you cannot see DNA. It's very, very small. Evidently smaller than this, because we can see this with a microscope. But you cannot see DNA. Now, they claim they can see something, or they get indications from some, squiggly or whatever, but I don't believe that it's real. I think they're lying. I don't think they even know what DNA looks like. I think they do the same with that as they do with the stars and the atoms. They made up the whole model. They called it the atom. And when we were kids, they used to show us pictures of these atoms. And they'd have a nucleus with a neutron, and they'd have a proton and an electron going around the outside. They were little round balls. And it looked a lot like a solar system. Well, now we're told that that's just completely an artistic picture. They made it up. They cannot see atoms. They cannot see neutrons, let alone photons. They got all these names. But we really have no reason to believe that any of this exists. Now they claim it's just waves. Well, wait a minute. What's a wave? A wave is something like we talk about with sound. Sound goes through a medium. So it's not sound that's making a wave. The vibration, it's like a water surface, the ocean. You see a wave in the ocean. There's no such thing as a wave other than the water itself making the wave. So you need a medium, a substance that makes a wave. You need to vibrate that substance, to jar it, to shake it. In other words, you're causing it, you're giving it a force. And then we could extrapolate from there and say, okay, frequency. A higher force or a dull thud or different kinds of thuds and forces. We know that's real because we hear sounds at higher pitches and lower pitches. So this isn't sleight of hand. This is just reality, and it makes sense, and it's nature. They're not inventing it. But when they try to make models of these wavelengths, and instead of calling them wavelengths, which would present to us a completely different picture of what all of this really is, because you wouldn't be able then to say that there is a radio wave and that there is a gamma wave or a microwave. You couldn't say that because there's no word to describe that wave other than the extent of the force, whether it's a mild push or a thud or a quick pop or whatever that might make the substance that you're dealing with, whether it's in the air or a piece of rock or whatever. Like a rock might make a clicky sound. A bell makes a ring, and you know that you can hear the bell a long way, so we know about vibrations. But there is no vibration. There's no bell vibration. It's just copper or aluminum or whatever type of metal that you make your bell out of. That's all you got. And then you got the air. There is no other thing called the wave. There's simply the force of the percussion that jars the bell to make the harmony. So we could call it harmony, but harmony is not a thing. It is other things coming into harmony that resonate. So anyway, we can go into that. But what I'm demonstrating is that they're lying about the fact, first of all, that there were atoms, that there were protons, electrons, neutrons. There are no electrons. The electron is an illustration to tell us that there is a charge, and even that's an illustration, because we don't charge things. All we do is bang it, and it will hold the resonance. That's your charge. But I don't want to go into that. I'm just pointing out that everything we're told is a lie. So they made a model Based on what? Well, they made the same model with the solar system. They have all these planets and the sun's in the middle, and then there's galaxies, and all these are models, but they don't know that it's real. They drew pictures of it. We have pictures of the solar system. You say, well, we can see that, just looking up in the sky. No, you can't. All you can see is this bright thing we call the sun, a luminescent ball that we call the moon, and little twinkly lights that we call stars, but we don't know what stars look like. They're telling us. And we don't know. We can't see that the sun is round. All we can see is it's a round disk, but we can't see if it's a globe. We think the moon is a globe, but it could be a concave or convex. It could, it could be just a spotlight in the sky, or, we don't know. It could be a lens. So we're not sure, but they're making up this model. Even if we could prove that the moon was round, we can't prove that the earth is round from that, and we can't prove that the sun is round or the stars are round. They're not. We can't prove that they're not little slits in the firmament. I mean, that's what the Germans believed. So these are models that they make. They're CGI pictures. Well, CGI. They're artist renditions of what they want you to believe that it is. It turns out it's completely different. It's not even similar. Atomic things are not the same as vibrations, and vibrations are certainly not real because we've just proven that. So it is sleight of hand. And so when they show you a picture of DNA, they're just giving you a model. And so not only can they not see the DNA, when they claim they can splice DNA, you have to ask yourself, okay, so if DNA is so small we can't see it in a microscope, which must be pretty small because we just saw like 7 layers zooming into a little speck that is a nano length, far smaller than a human hair. And we went 7 times zoomed in. Like, I don't know how many times within it. So, if that's true, now AI says it's true, and you see that structure, every layer has these little, what appears to be chips and lines that are dimensional, like little boxes, triangles, rectangles, that are symmetrically pieced together as if somebody placed them there. They're not saying it's natural, like just a natural, like deity made it. They're saying they made this structure. So what size of tweezers did they use to put them in there, to construct it? Well, they claim, now get a load of this. They admit that you can't use tweezers because we're talking about the hair itself is the first layer. All right, even if you could make tweezers the size of a human hair, you couldn't use it with your fingers. It would be impossible. It's ridiculous. But we're talking about 7 to 15, or they claim that they can do this thousands of layers deep. Now, of course, immediately, any rational mind would say, well, it's impossible, for that kind of symmetry. Little rectangles and squares and tubes and almost looks like wires and, little miniature nano buildings and what are they, diodes and transistors and all of these things. But it literally, without any hesitation, I will tell you that's impossible. It would be impossible. It would be impossible to do it on the size scale of a hair, let alone 7 layers zoomed in, smaller, or thousands. Perfectly in absolute symmetry. So what they claim is that, of course you're right. You couldn't do it with tweezers. You couldn't do it mechanically. So what are they doing? Well, they admitted it's not anything other than a picture. They use light with a stencil that they shine the light through the stencil that makes the pattern. Now, how do they make that stencil so small? Well, they make the smallest stencil they can come up with and use a light beam, and it shines onto a silicone, I guess, flat chemical, like a photocopy, like a carbon copy, and the light shines onto it, and with chemicalization, the light gets through part of it and prints that symmetry. So it's literally a picture. It's not anything but a picture. It is not mechanical. It isn't anything real. It's only a picture. And they will admit that. And then, now, of course, that wouldn't be that small. They might be able to do that, I don't know, down to the size of a hair. I don't know, with a stencil. But then they take with a lens, a glass lens, to focus that beam of light in and zoom it. And they focus that shape, that symmetry. They can zoom it in and focus it in smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until it's thousands of times smaller. I don't even believe that. I mean, maybe 7 times smaller than a hair. I don't believe that either. But okay, so now you focus that picture, that symmetry, through the stencil, and you focus it into a smaller thing. Okay, but it's not a real thing. It's a picture. It's just light. How are you going to get that to form on a surface? Well, they claim they use some kind of chemical. I mean, what kind of chemical's that small that you could melt part of it and the rest of it would stay structurally sound? I don't know. But so none of this makes any sense to me at all. But what you're really talking about is a picture, a photograph that is digitally it's a computer picture that is very, very small. Now, they claim that the reason it works, because I called them out and I said that's impossible because I'll show you what I asked them. And I will not read verbatim their reply because it's incomprehensible, it's nonsensical, and it is obviously, on the face of it, a lie. But I will share with you what I asked them about this. I said, it's one thing to make a resistor with a chemical substance, or a diode with a carbon, or a motor by wrapping copper conduit. But to use light and silicone to print something that you say can do something you specifically intend, as specific as synthetic hormones or instructions, data to program DNA, seems quite illogical. Yes, a stencil could be made like a carbon copy, but light itself or just silicone would be basically useless unless it was a chemical process entirely by accident you came upon. But it would definitely be unlikely to do anything other than mimic a chemical reaction. And then to shrink it, and somehow all this magically from stage to stage works perfectly. To shrink it into some symmetrical functioning thing is just too much to believe. I'm sorry. So what we have here is it's the same thing with the outer space. When I start digging deep and asking them questions, they don't have answers. They say, oh, well, we got pictures. Oh, those are CGI. Oh, well, okay. Well, we went to the moon. No, that's been proven to be fake. Oh, well, we've got proof somewhere. Not real proof, but we've got proof that we can manufacture. So the proof that they have nanotechnology is this picture, the video. And even the scientists themselves might be looking at it and say, look, Dave, I've seen it. I've had people tell me, oh, I've seen galaxies. I've seen other planets in a gamma telescope or something. And like, well, do you know what you're looking at? It's like the people on the movie Avatar that Y'all went to go see the movie about how they went to some other planet. I guess it was Mars. But they didn't go. The whole movie was a cartoon. It was a holographic simulation. They were in a drawer. And all of you watched that movie, and none of you figured it out that they were telling you exactly how they're going to take you to Mars. They're not going to take you to Mars. It's a picture. It's always CGI. Just like they claim they got pictures of galaxies and people. Even scientists will look at it. I'm sure there are scientists that look at this nanotechnology and they go, oh, yep, there it is. But they're looking at pictures in a little microscope. It's not even a microscope. It's a digital scope. In other words, it's a camera. They're looking at CGI, digitally created psyops. And the scientists believe it. All your doctors that are running around prescribing medicines for you and claiming, well, the stats say it works, they ignore the fact that the people end up dying a few months later of some other disease. Or that burning or radiating your lung out is not curing cancer of the lung. It's simply destroying your lung. I mean, if I cut your lung out and say I've cured the lung cancer, I'm an imbecile. If I cut your heart out and say I've cured heart trouble because the heart's not sick anymore because it's gone, but you're dead, that's totally the definition of insanity. But nobody seems to understand the sleight of hand. You're all mesmerized. That's why some people cannot be hypnotized, because they don't believe in it. And if you don't believe in it, you will not submit to their hypnotism, their mesmerism. And all of science is a big lie. There is no proof that the DNA looks like that, or that they can splice it, or that they've got nanotechnology, but yet we have computers. Well, they're doing it somehow. They come across a method, a natural mechanical thing. You know, you take a bell, you bang it, ring, and they discover that you can make music. And then to some people, it's like magic. And then they develop this further, and they can duplicate certain sounds electronically. And then they can take and have a series of computer algorithms that causes that to repeat. And you might think that it went through the air, but it's actually gone through a cable. Have you noticed that we don't really use satellites for the phone? We use big cables that go under the oceans from continent to continent. They use balloons, weather balloons, instead of rockets a lot of the times for any of these supposed satellites. We don't know what all of this is, but a lot of it is just cameras and surveillance. It's like, here we are supposedly using AI, but now they got to build 100,000 times bigger databases for this AI to run the world, which it would be incomprehensible that AI, as well as it works now, would need to be upgraded 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 times, unless they're only trying to mesmerize you. It's the sleight of hand. They show you a picture of what they can do, and then you begin to believe them. And they don't tell you that the real AI is not that complicated. It's a bunch of maybe 1 million people that they hire to sit in cubicles all day long typing out answers that they then put into a machine, and they can just, because I've seen how computers can be, how they can, it's like an abacus with math, how you can have a computer scan for a word, and then that word will flag an answer that they want to give you. And they can have this very complicated system that looks very intelligent, but it's nothing like human intelligence. It is simply like an abacus magically coming up with what is the square root of 1,462, right? So, you know how they would interview people like Neil Armstrong or Glenn, what is his name? Anyway, they would interview these astronauts and claim they were liars. You never went to the moon. And these old guys now, they're like 70 or something, and they're like looking and they're like, get out of here, and they're all pissed off. And you don't know, like, well, what do you mean? These guys are liars? They all liars? I mean, certainly the group that supposedly exploded in the Challenger accident that we find that are still alive running around that we have proven are the same individuals. They're obviously lying. They probably paid them. And well, who would lie even for money? Oh, a lot of people. But here's the thing. They are all Masons. Remember, there's a group of people running around flashing these secret signs. They're all in on it, but you're not. And they can't tell you. And if anybody does go out and tell, they just suicide them. So, of course, they can keep all the secret. But maybe Glenn and Neil don't know that they weren't on the moon. They might have been here. Or, I mean, or maybe they got one like they have for Mars for the moon. I believe they do. I think the moon is a real white color, almost blue sometimes or gray. That could be at the Arctic. But there are these pictures going around showing that this place that they showed on Mars is actually, one of them's on Devon Island. Now you can go on your Google Earth and focus down on Devon Island, and you can see the Mars rover there and all the, the cameras and everything. And you can see and prove that they're doing something there. Why would they? Well, they claim, oh yeah, we're just playing around down there in Devon Island because it's similar to Mars. We're practicing. Like, okay, but I'm just saying, look, and is that actually a picture of Devon Island and that's a picture of Mars? I don't know. I'm not telling you that's an actual picture of Devon Island. But I will tell you, I've zoomed in on it and I found places on Devon Island, most of that whole area up there, that looks exactly like Mars. I haven't played around enough to find the exact hill or mole or peak or whatever, but it does look like it to me. I would bet it's probably accurate. However, I'm only pointing out that they can lie, and if they can, they will. And so I firmly believe that maybe Neil Armstrong or whoever these guys are that supposedly thought they went to the moon, maybe they really did believe it. Maybe they got in a capsule and they shook it and beat it and banged on the outside and, made some electrical lights go on the screen, and outside, they put a picture of space and they thought they were, maybe they were at the Magic Eye Theater. There was one of them that played a recreation of Abraham Lincoln, and it's like this round movie weird stage. I think it's Epcot Theater where they showed the Michael Jackson one or whatever. But it gave you the sense that it was real, but you were just at a theater. And then nowadays they've got scratch cards where you go into theaters, you can get the smells, and they're 3D, and it looks 3D, and the sounds coming from behind you and in front of you, and it's all made to look like a hologram. Well, they're getting better and better at all of this, and they're going to get to a place where you'll believe whatever they tell you. So the reason I believe it is all sleight of hand and a trick pony show, just like the old circuses, it was circus acts, is because that's what they do. And they're not God, and they can't go to a faraway gazillion light years star that's in a vacuum of nothing light years away. They can't make nanotechnology functioning with a stencil and light beam and zooming it down into some small little, it's all ridiculous. They don't have proof for it, so therefore I don't believe them. And all their pictures are CGI. But it's not all fake in the sense that it doesn't do anything. Oh, it does something. They've got something up their sleeve. This AI is doing something. It's manipulating your mind. It's taking over the world. It is complicated. It is profoundly technical. But it's not what they say it is. They're not God. They're not creating a consciousness. They're not creating an artificial intelligence. It's not artificially intelligent at all. It is sleight of hand. But now let's take a look at this gene slicing that they claim they do. And they claim they can like Monsanto can make genetically modified food. Well, let me show you, and this is a good way to show you exactly what they're doing when they say they can do all these things, but they're not, and what it's really doing. So with a genetically modified food, let's take corn. All right, so that means they're so smart they can make corn, or they can genetically modify corn into some other thing, right? Wow, they're like God. They can evolve things into they can clone pigs. No, they can't. Here's what happens. In nature, a animal cannot breed with another type of animal if it's not among the species. So cats can breed together. Polar bears can breed with grizzly bears because they're both bears. But you can't get a dog to breed with a bear, even though they're closely related in some way. I mean, maybe they claim they look a little bit like each other, but they can't breed. You can't get cats and dogs to breed. You can't. Now, you can get a horse to breed with a donkey. But here's the problem. They're not related close enough to continue breeding them. What comes out of that situation is the mule. You can breed a male donkey and a female horse together, and they'll have a child, a mule. But the mule cannot reproduce. It's genetically impossible. So what this tells you is that animals that are closely related or are of the same species can reproduce. But you get to a point where they're not related close enough, they can't produce. So if nature cannot do it, you can't just make some monster. Nature won't allow that. Monsters would ruin all of society or the world. You can't mix a pig with a human or something. And these twits are never going to be able to do that. They cannot clone. They don't have that power. They're not God. What they do is they tell you they can do it, but they never show you. Or if they did show you, it's just some, sleight of hand. They tell you that they're doing it, and then they get these stories all over the internet that all of the people like Trump or Biden were clones. No, they're not. They don't know how to make clones. They cannot make clones. They'll never be able to make clones. And they cannot splice genes. Now, then you say, well, what about Monsanto? They're making genetically modified corn. No, they're not. What they're doing is they're taking corn. They don't know how to make corn, or they can't invent some other, vegetable. Oh, we made a twiddly-dink, right? It's good. It's better than corn. It's better than beans. We've combined twiddlies and dinks together, and now we got twiddly dinks, right? No, they can't do that. What they do is they take the corn and they splash chemicals on it, and it mutates the corn so that the corn is almost dead but still survives. Part of the genetic code is melted off or is not functioning. And this is how they genetically modify watermelons, certain like beans or potatoes or whatever. It's just chemically mutilated. Anybody could do that. You don't need to be a scientist. You can take a little seed that's going to grow up to be a watermelon or a corn stalk and soak it in some chemical and get it to be then mutilated. You can mutilate it and it will grow up deformed. You can take that's how when you have a female dog that has relations with her own pups, those pups will come out, but they will be deformed. They will come out missing a snout, or sometimes they're missing their heart and they'll die at birth. Okay, you're not cloning them. You're not genetically modifying them. All you're doing is mutilating them. You're poisoning them. You're murdering them. You're not making something better. You're simply saying, oh, I've got a dog. I cut off his nose. And now I've got a noseless dog that I've created. No, you didn't. You mutilated a dog. All right, so this is what they do, and they call it genetically manipulating and da-da-da-da. And they got a lot of little tricks up their sleeve that they want you to believe. It's sleight of hand. They want you to believe they're God. So how do they splice a gene? Well, they just put the little saliva, or what they call DNA. They claim that every cell has a certain DNA. Well, it does. It's got a vibration. But they can't see it. But it does have a certain resonance. We all have our own resonance or frequency. They can drop chemicals on it and change the frequency. It's like saying, I got a bell, and it goes bing, right? And I cut half the bell off, and now I go bong. Oh, I've changed it. I've genetically modified a bell. Well, actually, all I've done is taken a blowtorch and cut half the bell apart. I am not a genius. I am just an idiot. I'm a liar. I am a mesmerist, hypnotist, literally not a true magi of the ancient priesthood, but I am a sleight of hand magician, like David Copperfield. And they're always usually Jews, aren't they? Who's that guy? Uri Geller, a Jew who claimed he could bend spoons and stuff. Listen, I promise you, all of that is sleight of hand. It's all sleight of hand. Not that you couldn't do it. Jesus walked on water. But you're going to have to be far more amazing than a silly little modern sleight of hand magician working for MGM or Circus Circus in Las Vegas. You're a fraud. Now, prayer is the only way that you can actually change anything, because mind over matter is the only real way that everything comes into being or changes. And I've done that. You can pray, you can believe, and the circumstances will change. But metal isn't bent or moved that way. The way that miracles happen is they happen in a natural way, because that's how everything happens. When you believe, that's what you manifest. It's a natural process. So when I believe that my car's going to start, when it's not starting, it won't be, oh, some miracle. All of a sudden, the Lord just reaches down out of heaven and angels come out with a toolbox and fix your car. No, it's going to just miraculously start. And then if you try to figure out why it started, you'll find that in that split second when you believed and you spoke the word, the manifestation of reality was just what you believed. It happened according to what you believe. Whatever you ask, you shall receive. Whatsoever you desire when you pray, believe that you have already received it, and you shall. But you're not gonna see it literally, the car hood open and something happens, ghosts come down and the metal on your car transforms. Like, for instance, let's say you got in a car accident and your bumper was broken, and you prayed that the bumper would get bent back into the right place and you could move on down the road like it never happened. The way that would actually occur is if you literally needed, for a very important reason, because somebody was dying, you had to get to the hospital or whatever, you prayed, Lord, please make my car get to the hospital. What would happen is the most natural way. Somebody would stop, pick you up, take you to the hospital, or automatically your car would just start running because, and nobody would be able to prove that it was a miracle. It would just start working because what you believe will happen. Miracles happen. But what they're trying to do is sleight of hand. When they're pretending that they can make a lemon tree appear in the middle of a crowd of onlookers, what they've done is spiked your drink with a drug, a hallucinatory drug, and with the power of suggestion, they can make you all believe you see a lemon tree appear. I know that because my teacher, Don Juan, would have his students partake of peyote, and then they would go on a walk and they could all magically talk to ravens and wolves. Because you can talk to wolves, but you've got to be in a different state of mind. You can't do it in this conscious reality. You have to come out of this consciousness and go to the place that is magical, where we can communicate with the animals. So what I'm saying is that amazing things can happen, but it's not what they're telling you it is. So they're not actually going to the moon, and they're not going to go to Mars. But what is this Neuralink? Well, that probably isn't true either. There probably is no such thing as a Neuralink. However, a hologram is possible. We see the principles of a hologram all the time when you watch a movie. I used to work at a theater where I would be in the projector room, and I would turn the projector on, and the light would shine through the film onto the screen. And I knew exactly how it worked. It was light shining through a negative. Think of it like a carbon copy. You go to the store to get a print. You have a white piece of paper, and then you put ink on a printer, and it prints an outline. That was the most primitive way to make a copy. And then they started doing it with negatives. They would shine light through a negative. And that was how cameras came to be. But it would just be black and white. In order to make it into color, they had to take it to a laboratory and make what they called internegatives. And they had to make it a color negative. It wasn't true color. I remember NBC came out with true and living color. Well, it's not really truly living color. Obviously, they painted it. They found ways to make the negative into like the lightest part where the light shined through, they would make that the lightest color, like yellow, and the darker parts would be a burnt sienna or whatever. They had this color code. They had to make the color print. And then they would shine the light through it. It would shine on the screen. It would look like it was in color, but it wasn't living color. And then later they got better at it and they called it living color, but it still was just a better way with more colors to make it look more real. They started off with just a few colors, and then they made it into more colors. A lot of your television sets were just black and white, but they said they were color. And if you looked at the back of your screen, you'd see red, yellow, and blue light shining to mix with the negative to somehow make the negative turn to color. It's very interesting how they did it, but it wasn't magic. It was mechanical, and things can be done that will blow your mind. Now, if you take and run that light from several different directions, then in the middle of these various lights that are coming in from different angles, you can make it look 3D. You can make a hologram. It might look real. You might think you're there, but it's a sleight of hand. They cannot actually transport you to another place like they did on Star Trek. They cannot do magic. They are not God, but they can deceive you. And the Bible says that in the last days they will do these great signs and wonders, fearful sights from heaven, which some will translate monstrous, fearful, terror sights. They will have aliens. The Bible says they're going to cause these aliens to appear in the sky and fearful sights. Remember this whole Atlas 3A1, whatever it was that we were seeing there for a while? It's all a spectacle. Remember the drones that everybody was going out and looking at in the sky? The government was making them. They want you to believe that there is aliens. It's part of a psyop, brothers and sisters. And they're also wanting you to believe that there are pandemics and plagues that aren't. pandemics and plagues. So they invented this theory that there's a virus and that you could catch it. When in actuality, everybody, when they get a runny nose, their body's detoxing. That's all that's happening. You can get toxins in your system, and they can put toxins in your system. But then they come up with some crazy idea that, Yahweh's the one that first started this. In the plagues that were there upon the Egyptians, if you look at most of those plagues, they were parasites. They were the flies, there was the locusts, there was the gnats, there were the frogs. There was all these different parasites. And then the water turned to blood. Well, that's probably because all the animals died and they were soaking in the water. So Moses is the one who caused those plagues. And in the book of Revelation, it talks about Moses and Elijah, the two witnesses, which represents Moses, the law, which brings the plagues and all the wrath, the judgments. And then Elijah. And what does Elijah do? He doesn't bring judgments. He turns the hearts of fathers back towards sons. He prophesies and testifies of Christ. He's a lamp shining in the wilderness, saying, follow ye him. So you have to take and understand that we're being lied to on every front. But now, remember where this all started. We got to go back to the Nazis. We're told, it's sleight of hand, we're told that the Nazis wanted to take over the world. Well, they financed all the different sides. They made it look like we were about to have a war because they needed to bankrupt all the world, take over the world, and then get their scientists to start experimenting on us. So they started chemical companies with the Nazis and the MK Ultra mind experiments and the LSD. One of the things when they finally brought them over here with Monsanto and DuPont and all of these systems, and you look at all these products that you're buying, the chemicals that are in the foods, it was purposeful. And all the, the companies have this all-seeing eye or the upside-down crosses or the 666 or all over the symbolisms, all over the packaging. You see, it's all from the occult. It's a scam. And what are they trying to do? Well, let's take it back all the way to, let's go to the influenza. 1918, some crazy reason, a thing called the flu, the influenza, spread across the world, killed something like 50 million people, they claim. Well, World War I was just before that. Remember, 1914 was World War I. And that war lasted 3 or 4 years, about till 1918. So, isn't it odd that the flu came in? Now, World War I only killed, they claim, 15, 16, 18 million or something people worldwide. Something like 16 million people. This flu that comes along right at the end of the war, 1918, kills 50 million people. And then, remember the 1920s, the Charleston, then we had famine. Why do you suppose we had famine? Well, you see, they're all interrelated. The war, which is caused by financial expertise and scare tactics and politics, it was all manipulated, killed 16 million people. Once you've got all these bodies laying all over the place, and the ones that were still alive were all malnutritioned now, their countries were left devastated, the buildings in heaps, well, you're going to get sick, aren't you? And what is the flu? As I said, if your body gets weak and you have toxins and you can't expel the toxins because you're so sick, and perhaps you haven't even had a good diet, and maybe you're eating dead food along the road, it's got bacteria, and there's all these reasons why people are going to then, after the war, start coming down with what they're going to call the flu and just die because they're malnutrition and starving and weak from all the process. And then voila, a few years later, because all these people died, there's nobody in the fields working, they're sick. You're going to have famine because nobody's out there trying to grow crops. You don't have workers. All the people died. There's reasons why famine will occur after the epidemic. Look at Revelation chapter 6. You see a horse coming, a white horse coming to conquer with a toxic bow. It's Apollo. And then you've got a red horse, which is war. And then you've got famine and pestilence, and death in Hades follows. That's how it works, guys. And it has nothing to do with an actual disease. And even the diseases that Moses gave them were just bugs. And what happens when you get bit by bugs? Well, there's toxins and poisons in the bugs. And if you get too many bites, it can weaken you and you can die. So those are toxins. Nobody's denying that you get bit by a snake, you're going to die, right? But they have no ability to slice and manipulate cells or to create anything in a laboratory. Even this CO, thingy that they were talking about is probably, it doesn't even exist. And the one where you was bleeding out, they called it Ebola. They got it from monkeys. And what's that? Well, monkeys are very, very nasty in some situations. They became cannibals. They got parasites from the monkeys, which had a whole lot of toxins that somehow they could take to a laboratory and put it in a way that they could transfer it in mass in the food to give it to all the chickens. And then the chickens we had the chicken flu, or we could get the monkey flu, or we could get the pig swine flu, or whatever. But they would put it into animals and then crossbreed it into us. It's not some genius thing. I mean, if you go back to the 1300s with a bubonic plague, they will tell you that these men came in black robes. They were priests, Jesuits, and they had what looked like sais. They call them the Grim Reapers. And whenever these guys would come in with the black robes and the sais, all people in the town would die. Well, they weren't sais. They were spraying all of this toxins and poisons. And probably there'd been a war and people were weak. And they could just get everybody to come down with some toxin that their body couldn't overcome. You see, what? Bubonic plague? What the heck is that? Why don't we have it today? Oh, they cured it. No, they didn't. So then that's what's going on. It's all the sleight of hand. And so then 1914 was World War I. So we had the 1918 flu epidemic. 50 million people worldwide because the war was worldwide. And people were weak and they were dying. Not to mention the fact that during the war, there was probably a lot of poisons going around. They may have poisoned people. They didn't call it chemical warfare, but they probably did. They had a lot of this was all new. We had cars all of a sudden, gasoline and chemicals and oil. But it wasn't very long. I remember 1918, the flu. In the 1920s, we had a thing called diphtheria, and tuberculosis broke out everywhere. Well, diphtheria was caused by, in the 20s, about exactly the same time, they started spraying all the agricultural areas, the fields around New York and Pennsylvania and all the populated areas there. They started putting lead and arsenic in the soil and in the paint, lead paint, and in the gasoline. Well, there was so much lead and arsenic in the food that people were coming down. It would swell up their glands. Their body had so much toxin, and it was a strange toxin coming out their tonsils and out of because toxins come out of your nose and out of your sinus and out of your tonsils and your throat. That's where it gets stuck. And, just when you have normal toxins. But if you've got lead and arsenic and all of this, copper was another thing. They started putting, different chemicals and things. What was the other one? But they started, your body would try to release it and it would come out in your tonsils. Doctors would try to scrape it off the children's tonsils, and it was so stuck on there in gluey, gooey gook that it would literally make their throats bleed, so they couldn't scrape it out. So thousands of children were dying, and they just called it diphtheria. Well, it wasn't. It was lead, arsenic, copper sulfate. They would put it on the meat because if it looked like it was aging or graying, they would spray it on the meat and feed it to the children and the grown-ups. But the grown-ups were stronger and they could make it through it. But the children couldn't handle all the copper sulfate in their little lungs and their little throats, and they died of it. This is also when they started using formaldehyde, putting it in the bread and all the food. It preserved everything, but it was literally, you use formaldehyde in taxidermy. It literally will preserve you, but it will kill you. I mean, your body will turn to leather and shrivel up and die. And they were putting this formaldehyde in everything. They were putting borax in stuff, and that was killing people. Well, today I hear all this trend of people, oh, I'm taking borax. What in the fiddly diddly you doing? You don't take chemicals and minerals like that. Oh, you just go buy a bag of borax and take a spoonful of it, stir it up in your water and drink her down. Oh, I'm telling you. Oh, but it gets rid of all these pathogens, Dave. Yeah, maybe a spoonful of salt would preserve a beef steak, but you don't drink tons of salt or borax or anything. You need trace amounts of this. Do not take borax, you fools. Don't take all this nonsense. I hear people taking this stuff that it's called miracle whatever, you put in water and they drink it. That literally will kill you. I want you to understand something. The only way you can have health is to eat food. Do you understand? Let me explain it to you. I want to spell it for you. It's FOOD. It's a substance that grows from the ground by nature, a whole food. That is the only thing you need to put in your mouth. And if you're dying or sick of anything, it isn't a medicine that's going to heal you. It's to stop taking poisons and go back to eating food. Period. Do not take any kind of medicine, pharmaceutical drugs, chemicals, nothing other than the natural, balanced mineral content that's in water and food. You see, like nettle, stinging nettle, milk thistle, and moringa. These are plants that have all these, spirulina, have all these minerals and things that you can use. You don't need to take, synthetic chemicals that you buy at Walmart. So the children were dying and they gave it a name. We'll call it diphtheria. You remember this thing called meningitis? Do you know that meningitis came along exactly the same year that they claimed they cured polio? Because they needed to pretend that they were going to cure some disease to make themselves look like God. Because they knew what was causing the polio. And I'll tell you what it is here in a minute. But, so they knew it was going to end. But it was caused from the war. Polio was from World War II. There was a flu shot that they came out with in 1945. And after that, cancer skyrocketed. And a thing called polio. The March of Dimes and all that was going on. They claimed my dad had it. But it was all because of the poisons and the toxins and all these things. Polio was just that you would have like scoliosis or something. Your bones would, it's like you didn't have enough calcium in your diet, or you were just weak and you didn't have good nutrition and your back was hurting and you started shriveling up. We don't really even know what caused it, but they would put all those symptoms in a paragraph and call it polio in the doctor's encyclopedia. It was called polio. You had those symptoms. At the end of that polio crisis, they went into that encyclopedia, doctor's handbook. They took the name polio out and they just put meningitis in where it used to say polio, because they had to make it look like this polio shot they were giving everybody was curing everybody. Well, it wasn't curing people. They just said, oh, now we've got an epidemic of meningitis, but it's the same thing. So this is what they would do. Now, let's go to, so by the way, cancer was literally unheard of. And if you look it up, they'll say, oh no, we knew about cancer. The Egyptians talk about it. The Egyptians didn't say cancer. They didn't talk about cancer. The Bible talks about what, leprosy and things like that, but nobody, or a shriveled arm. That's not cancer. Cancer literally started in the 1930s. And the reason for that was that's when they started the shots or the vaccines for the diphtheria. Well, the diphtheria was caused from the lead paint. You see what they do? They're so conniving. All of this is connived, and we couldn't, it's so connived, you couldn't even unconnive it and figure out what caused what or what didn't cause any. All I can tell you, I guarantee, you eat food and only food, don't eat poisons, and you're going to be safe. And also cancer was on the rise because they started giving people cigarettes. And of course, remember the first cigarettes was full of formaldehyde, and that'll cause lung cancer. So that caused a lot of the cancers when you're talking about lung cancer. But that's completely different than the other kind of cancers that started in the 30s. And that's about the time that the cigarettes started. But it wasn't just the cigarettes causing, because some of these cancers were of a different kind. And it was probably being caused from the flu vaccine that they had in 1945 and the diphtheria vaccine that they started in the 30s and stuff. And this is where they were trying to cure all the lead poisoning and the arsenic and the copper and the formaldehyde and all of these poisonings. And then when they stopped putting the lead, and remember the lead was still in the gasoline all the way up until when I was a kid. They finally took it out of the paint and the gasoline. And we're like, why are you doing that? It makes my car run bad. Oh, yeah. But it was also giving the children diseases. Now, yes, there was cancer before 1972. And we're going to tell you why 72. That's when Fort Detrick in Maryland started studying cancer, autoimmune deficiency, or 1971 Nixon did something and they switched it over to start studying cancer. Or did they invent it? See, because they used the word cancer for different things. There's another thing called cancer. It's lung cancer. That was created because of cigarettes that started in the 30s, and all the men, not the women because they didn't smoke, but the men all started dying of lung cancer. And they didn't die right away. It took a while for them, in the beginning when they had formaldehyde and stuff in the filters and tar and really bad things, they died right away. But as time went on, they cleaned that up and people didn't die for years. People were still dying of lung cancer 20, 30 years ago, but that's kind of gone, by the wayside as well. That was lung cancer. It was just literally radiating your lung out. It's different than this other thing they call cancer, which is an autoimmune deficiency. Autoimmune deficiencies, cancer, arthritis, diabetes 1, and all these other things, leukemia, is autoimmune deficiency, AIDS. And yes, Fort Detrick started studying it in 1972, and that's when the first cases started coming up with AIDS, and it all took off in 1981. We're going to explain why. So don't get confused with the fact that there were cancer cases in the 30s and 40s, but those were mostly lung cancers and cancers that had to do with radiation or other problems. It's completely different than this autoimmune deficiency or AIDS, which AI will tell you they're not the same thing. AIDS, AIDS, with the S on the end, is not the same as the autoimmune deficiency of cancer, arthritis, leukemia, and all these things. Well, why do they call it the same thing? The exact same name for these two different things? Well, it's the same thing. They say the difference is that AIDS takes over your body. You have no immune system and it just attacks you. Whereas the other one is an autoimmune and it starts attacking its body, or they got some, cockamamie story that they're different. But here's the thing. It's the same virus. They created only one, autoimmune deficiency. They tweak it to do very different things, to do many different things. Well, of course, proof for that is that autoimmune deficiency is arthritis, is leukemia, is diabetes 1, maybe 2, I don't know. I think diabetes 2 is more caused from eating sugar and glycinating your body. If you stop eating sugar, you don't get diabetes 2. So yeah, poisons will kill you too. But autoimmune deficiencies, various things. It started with the study of supposedly cancer or AIDS. Why would they start studying cancer and AIDS and autoimmune deficiency all at the same time, and it all has the same name, and claim it's different? Yeah, they're lying. So now remember, Fort Detrick in Maryland was originally a biological weapons manufacturing place that they used in World War II and so forth. Nixon came along because they were using it in Vietnam and places. They were dropping Agent Orange and everything, and it was all created by the United States. They didn't have any problem with just killing people with chemicals and death, but they, in order to use it on their own people and worldwide as a mass murder of all the people so they can make a lot of money and study people and do experiments on them, they had to make it look like it wasn't them giving it to them. They couldn't just drop it from the sky. But they did do it on purpose, as we'll show. So immediately they start studying these things all together, and immediately, boom, they all just start popping up. And I don't know if the flu and the COVID is related to it, but it seems like they all come from the same thing. If you go back, they'll always tell you that AIDS came from monkeys. Oh, well, so does Ebola, and so does the flu. But, of course, it comes from different kinds of animals. You got the swine flu, the bird flu, and the monkey flu. Well, yeah, the worst one might be the monkey. But you see, they claim it starts from the one, and then they spread it in the chicken population. They spread it in the swine population to get it to spread into the human population. That's how come the flu and stuff like that spreads. And you might have one or various different strain of it. You might have a swine but how could it be one's a swine, one's a bird, one's a monkey? Because they're all the same parasite dwelling on all these different animals and spread through different ways. So they know what they're doing, and they took that and developed it, but we don't know if that's where they got the idea to develop it into full-blown autoimmune deficiency. And they tweaked it a little bit more and got Ebola and go, oops, that's a little too much. We'll save that one for the apocalypse. But I guarantee you that all these diseases that have been spreading, whether it's cancer, diabetes, or leukemia, or arthritis, or whatever, mental diseases, or another whole aspect that they've been trying to do on this. But all of them are autoimmune deficiencies. They're all from the same testing and laboratory. And that's as far as they will admit. But I guarantee that AIDS is where it was used and on purpose to get spread. Now, remember, you probably heard the story where AIDS got started because Bayer Aspirin accidentally got AIDS in their aspirin. Huh? Accidentally got AIDS in their aspirin? We'd never heard of it before this. This was 1970s or something, right about the same time that they're inventing it, right? This accidentally got it in their aspirin. And they sent it to Africa on purpose because they didn't want the Americans to get it, because then they'd lose a lot of money if they just threw it away. So they thought, well, we'll get the Africans, right? They won't know. Well, that was a lie. Now, there's two reasons why it was not true. they're trying to lead you off the story. Remember that story we told you about how witnesses were telling everybody that John Dimmer didn't like Jehovah's Witnesses or Shakira or different people. These were stories where they started on purpose for political reasons or for control reasons. So the story that they try to tell you lies and things to get you off the trail. So it wasn't aspirin that was sent to Africa, and it wasn't sent to Africa. It was bear, but it wasn't aspirin. It was a blood coagulator, something that had to do with blood that was made by bear. And it was not sent to Africa, supposedly. It was sent to Japan, Taiwan, and Argentina. Well, isn't that crazy? Japan is the northwest east coast. Taiwan's the midwest east coast. Argentina is the southwest coast. And then, spontaneously, another place, San Francisco. And all of this is in 1981, when it takes off in this epidemic. They claim that the outbreak of AIDS in San Francisco amongst gays was on purpose too, but then they retracted that later on and they said, oh, it was a mistake, we're just kidding. It wasn't on purpose. But they never told us how it got started. Simultaneously, when it got started in Japan, Argentina, and Taiwan, and we know how it got started there. It was this bear company that literally on purpose, they didn't do it accidentally. Because if they did it accidentally, why would they send it to 4 corners of the world, right? That's ridiculous. And if it didn't get started by some guy named, some Dutrak or Zero Case that went to San Francisco that was supposed to be the first case. I mean, this was their original story that this guy had it and he went there on purpose and spread it. Well, I hear a lot of stories of how gay people will sleep with hundreds of people and spread it on purpose or something. Like, what? Are they stupid too? They're gay and stupid? I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right? They're both gay and evil? Why would you kill people? None of these stories ever made sense. They spread it. The government spread it. So these stories are just to lead you off the trail. However, we do know that the story about Bayer doing it, and of course they didn't go out of business. You can still go buy Bayer, right? Why would you buy medicine from a company, a pharmaceutical company, that purposefully spread the most epidemic disease known to man and didn't just accidentally, do it, but purposely sent it on purpose because of supposedly their bottom dollar. They didn't want to lose out on all the money and they didn't want to send it to America. So that's why they pretend it didn't happen that way in San Francisco. But they didn't send it to Africa. They started that story to lead you off because nobody cares about Africans, right? And nobody cares about gays, right? Well, guess who nobody cares about as well? Hemophiliacs. People who can't clot their blood or something. A specific group of individuals that were all dying because their blood wouldn't clot. So they infected hemophiliacs in Japan, Taiwan, and Argentina. Just them. And so it didn't spread. It was only given to them. Very interesting. But 4 corners of the earth. And then AIDS did spread everywhere. So Japan, Taiwan, and Argentina. Now, the 4th corner is over here in America. They can't tell you that they did it on purpose, so they just left that one open. Well, maybe somebody spread it, or they don't know how it got here, whatever. Well, all of these cases started in 1981. Oh, and there's a 5th place, Africa. That would be the other end of the world, right? South Africa. Well, how did it get to Africa? Well, it wasn't from bear. That story wasn't true. Bear spread theirs to Japan, Argentina, and Taiwan. How did it get to Africa? Well, they're going to claim it came from the monkey back in the early 1900s and it slowly crept, but there were no cases. But when the cases started breaking out in Africa was 1981, same year. I don't believe them. I don't know about you. But the reason they claimed that it happened in Africa, also on purpose, was that there was some, nursing company or whatever that were go over there transferring blood or something to patients. I don't know if they were taking blood samples or what they were doing. But they had one contaminated bag of blood and another that wasn't or something, and they took all the non-contaminated blood and gave it to the white people, and the contaminated blood, they gave it to all the Africans on purpose. They knew it was contaminated. So, look, Bayer did it on purpose, and it started in 1981 in those three different places: Japan, Taiwan, and Argentina. Then some other company does it on purpose, and it starts the epidemic 1981 because of blood transfer on purpose. And then in the same year, 1981, it starts in San Francisco. Now, remember that this was being studied, AIDS and cancer and autoimmune deficiency, beginning in 1971 at Fort Detrick, a weapons biolab. I guarantee that they started it on purpose and that they're tweaking it, and it has to do with, because by the way, I don't know if you've heard, but the other thingy that started, in 2020, the epidemic, pandemic thingy we all went through, that also was started in a laboratory in Fort Detrick, Maryland. And it wasn't China. That was a big lie. So what are they doing? Well, it's all related to not just biology, but biotech. And remember, the thingy introduced the push that the whole world found out. We're like almost mandatory. Everybody had to go down and get an injection. Well, what was in that? Well, guess what? Remember you heard about people talking about aborted feces and stuff, and nobody knew why they were putting aborted feces, cells, and tissue into it. And nobody ever came out and explained why. They're just like, oh, we deny it. Here's the reason why. Because this thing that we started off talking about at the beginning of the video, supposedly nanotechnology, or I should say microscopic technology, which can supposedly splice genes and transfer and manipulate gene therapy, can only be done if they take some of your cell, like they have to take a stem cell or something from your body. Then they can infect it with some nanotechnology that can splice or change your genes. A therapy, supposedly. Well, if this injection that they were giving us in the 2020 thing that they tried to make mandatory, which, by the way, they can't do it mandatory. They can intimidate you, but they can't make you do it. But if that had cells, human cells in it, there's only one reason. They need the human biology to attach the nanotechnology to, so that it can enter into the cell and do the therapy. A nice word for literally killing you. Or, by the way, all this is happening just before they lay out the whole, thingy, just a few years, because it's going to take a few years to get everybody, and if you didn't go and do it willingly, then later on you'll get the flu one that comes out the next year, or eventually your job will fire you, so you'll have to get it, or you'll get a swab, or there'll be some situation, they'll deteriorate your health through the food and the toxins or the air, and you'll eventually have to go to the doctor, and while you're there, you're going to get injected with something, right? So one way or another, and it's not like they can just do it without your knowledge. You still sign stuff. It's just that you're not signing for that particular thing, and you're told you got cancer or you're dying of this, that, or the other thing, and you got to sign a waiver saying that if, when you go under the knife, they can do whatever they got to do, right? And they just like, don't worry about it. It's nothing. We're going to just give you this little shot here. This will just be a pain medication, or this will be this or that. But you sign when you go to a doctor. People come out of that hospital. Well, they don't come out many times. They're, cutting your knee off and putting a plastic one in, or they're doing this or that. And it's all evil, but you sign for it. You agree to it, see? And they say, well, if you die, it's not our fault. You have to relinquish our guilt. We're not responsible. And so that's how they get around that. But if you've ever been to a doctor or you've ever gone to a clinic or you've done anything, that's another way they can get you. They got to get as many people to agree to this. You don't have to agree to it. You don't have to buy and sell. You can go out and live in the woods and get a farm if you want. But if you agree to this and everybody's got this, what's it for? Well, several years later, boom, they roll out AI. AI is going to interact with its biotechnology. And that is why, my brothers and sisters, all of this has been, it started with World War I and the Nazis. It started way before then, of course. This group's been, the Illuminati and these evil, wicked people like Aleister Crowley, John Dee. We've covered the history. But it got full swing with the Nazis and Paperclip and the Russian scientists and the American scientists and the KGB and all of this and the laboratories. And remember when this was all going and Fauci was up on the stand and Trump would go up there and some lady, I don't know what her name was, I can't remember. And they would talk about how you got to wear a mask and what the, risks of this and that and whether kids should get it and how old and all this stuff for, 2 or 3 years we went through this. And during this time, this question about the cells and the animal tissue and cellular tissue and aborted babies and all stuff was going on, and nobody answered the questions correctly. And if you'll remember, and it goes back to the financial system too, the SFC or whatever that Trump started. Remember, Trump's the father of the thingy, and he's at the same time started this financial system, which is now morphing into the Board of Peace and the Open AI and the AI whole system. AI is going to interact with humans. And remember, at that time, we were finding out that Bill Gates and all these other companies like Bezos and Amazon and these agreements that the terms to service in your computer stuff. And in the agreement that you click on, it would say, if you become a zombie, we can kill you or we own you, right? When you take our thingy, you're no longer human. You're now a zombie and you're a created biological tech. You're not a human anymore. You're a biohuman. And therefore now they have all rights. And you can't say no anymore. Once you've got the thingy, you cannot say no. And when this time comes, they will stick to the agreement. If you signed it, if you agreed to it, now I don't know, maybe if you apologized and went to the Lord in prayer and repented and went off in the woods and had, no contact with society again, the Lord would heal you and forgive you and you wouldn't be a part of this. But they have put it in the fine print that if you have done any of this and signed at the bottom line and got injected with any of this, that you are now a biological thing and they own you and they can do whatever they want. It's an experiment. And the experiment is right now still in the experimental stage. You see, what they're trying to do is just like with the AIDS. What they do is they give you a disease that you can't cure. You're going to die. Now, if you want to live, you got to take their pill and you got to go back every week or something and get a pill. Or take one a week or one a month or whatever it is. And you're now a slave. They can track you. They can monitor you. You have to do everything they say. And it costs a lot of money. And in order to get that money and to get your pill, you got to do what they say. And so basically you become a ward of the state in order to stay alive. And that's what this autoimmune deficiency is. Ultimately, they've been experimenting on us. And in small circles like Argentina and Japan and the hemophiliacs and the ones in the gays and these little communities, they were experimenting. They were given the pills. See, they didn't want to cure it. They just want to give you a pill that keeps you from dying. And if you don't want to die, you got to keep going back. So that's what ultimately this is going to be. You got to keep going back and get your injections every week. You then become a slave, a ward of the state, an experiment. You become a zombie, they own you, and they can experiment on you, and then you're still being experimented on. It's not the end of the road. You're just a slave now. And eventually then, what they're doing is giving you more diseases, trying to cure it, and if you die, well, oh well, you signed the agreement, we're not responsible, you're a zombie. You agreed. But ultimately, if you cooperate, they'll try to keep you alive. But you'll be a slave. And what they'll be doing is trying to figure a way to either make you immortal, and if they ever figure out that, they're not going to give it to you. They're going to take it. See, they're working on you as a guinea pig so they can figure out how they can bypass all of this nasty, evil consequences to their evil and sin. They want to live forever in their pleasure of sin. So this is the reason they didn't kill all the homeless people in California, because they're experimenting on them. This is the reason that they have this little group of gays that are all going to come down with disease, and they keep encouraging them to do this bad behavior because they want to have this little group of people they can experiment on. And they just give them a pill, and then they got to go back once a month, and then they can just keep monitoring them and their lifestyle. And they're probably monitoring not just their health and their biology and experimenting with them as far as how to, they think, know and understand how the biology works. They want to figure a way for them to live forever. But they're also trying to figure out how they can manipulate you and put holographic images in your head and make you believe that there is no deity, make you a slave, take your soul. You see, there are lots of reasons that they're doing all of this. AI is basically ultimately a machine that they're trying to build so that they can find a way to invent something to defeat Jesus when he comes. So they want thousands and millions of people that are guinea pigs that they can use to experiment on. They have all kinds of experiments going on, like Jehovah's Witnesses, to see if they can get them to kill their children, like disfellowship their own children, see how ignorant they can make them and how stupid they'll actually be and how far they'll go in their insanity, right? By offering them what? Oh, I don't know, a nice little job and a nice little community, but you've got to be a slave. You got to do what they say. Like the Jim Jones experiment. There's these other experiments that are bigger. You got the whole North Korean experiment where they're experimenting on millions of people over there. You've got the American experiment. Now, the reason that the American experiment's been so free, supposedly we had this freedom, is because that's part of the experiment. In this country, they want to see to what extent we will lose our morality, whether we will just become zombies and tell our children to mutilate themselves, and it's an experiment. And how many will not be affected? It's just like viruses. There's no such thing, but if you believe in it, then you're scared of viruses, and then you run to them for protection. And if you believe that there's no deity and Jesus isn't coming, then you'll run to them. It's all a big experiment. Ultimately, in the end, when they don't need us anymore, we're gone. And I think the day has arrived. I think they've got this, they've been experimenting on us for years, and they figured this all out. I don't think they need the gay community anymore, or the hemophiliacs, or the Gentiles of any kind, stripe, or form. I think that right around July 2nd, July 4th, there's going to be a collapse. It could be weeks later, but at some point the oil's going to run out. Then the big experiment starts, the collapse. We start starving. We start murdering one another and killing one another. And it's like Mad Max, Bedlam, as Trump puts it. And we all kill ourselves. And they go underground until it's over. And they come out and they take their technological advances and they use it to give themselves immortality. This is what they believe. The only problem is that Jesus is coming very, very soon. And, I want to keep talking because I wanted to share with you how they kept, the purpose for all of this and what they're doing. Because I don't think we've really fully detailed all of this. But I'm now almost in an hour and a half, and I'm going to have to quit here. So we'll probably keep doing this in another video. But I'm going to end it here, guys. I hope you have a wonderful evening. You know the Lord loves you. But please, guys, do not be fooled. Do not sign anything. Understand that it's at the door. You've got to get out of Babylon now and be no part of her, or you will share with her in her sins and partake of her plagues. I hope and pray for all of you that you will heed my warning. The time has come, and I hope you understand from this video what they've been doing and what they're capable of. I'm going to go ahead and go. Hope you have a wonderful evening. You know the Lord loves you all. His grace and His peace will be with you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.